Yes, there's toxic men, but masculinity in and of itself is not toxic. There's toxic women, but femininity in and of itself is not toxic.
Hey guys, it's Mindi Linscombe, your host of the Something New Show, and here we are learning how to live a life worth celebrating. And I have a very special guest. I am so excited. Our episode today is going to be fire, so good, and so many people are going to talk about it because I have Lisa Bevere here in the studio today, who used to live in Colorado Springs and was my friend, my neighbor, and now she has moved to Nashville, to Franklin, Tennessee, but she's back in town today. So I'm so lucky. When I started this show a year and a half ago, she was in my first top 5 list of who I wanted to interview, and I'm just so honored to have you in the studio today and to get to talk to you about all the things you're doing.
You know I love you so much. So I was so excited that I had enough time in town to have this conversation.
I know, because you are literally all over the world, and I just think that's so amazing that your message and messages are getting transformative, like in every country in multiple languages. And I should tell the guest about you in case they're not familiar. I mean, I'm sure most of them know who Lisa Bevere is.
I like going under the wire. It's okay.
Yeah, but you are a New York Times best-selling author and speaker, and we are going to dive a little bit into your story today, but then into the topics that I think are most relevant for our culture right now, today. So before we begin, when you lived here in town, I always looked up to you as a mom of boys.
Yes.
Because you have 4 amazing men as sons. They have all grown up to be incredible guys, and they are husbands and fathers and all the things. And we had so many boys.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say thanks for being my friend through the chaos of boys. And if people, just as a side note, we're not going to even talk about boys today, but like if they want to learn about raising boys, you have a resource for that.
We actually have an app called Messenger X, and there is a free course. And I think there's like 18 lessons or something called Moms of Men. And it is everything from raising boys to sitting down with my 4 boys and them talking about navigating things like pornography and lust and friendships. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So while we might not get to it today, I definitely want people to use that resource because it's free and it has helped me so much with raising my boys. And I've loved having you as a friend because there are lots of amazing women in the world, but something about you inspires me because of like the grit and the tenacity to be not afraid of what other people think, but to stand for what's right. And so I just want to say thanks for being that kind of role model for me, because I know we all have a voice and sometimes it's easy to be too cautious. And I mean, thanks for being that kind of friend.
Oh, absolutely. And I feel you're very much the same way. And sadly, Mindy, so many people are self-censoring. They're so afraid of getting the pushback that they're saying nothing, and they're losing their ability to talk because they don't even risk the ability to talk. And so there's a lot of chaos and people screaming in the void, and people are getting so confused because there's like, where's the common sense? Where's the clarity? Where are the people that actually will just speak to situations in a way I can understand without being divisive, without being binary? And so I think we have to use our voice. And even if it's uncomfortable, we need to do it for our children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In my case, grandkids.
Yes. Well, and I have some really big questions that I want to ask you today, because you are seen as an expert in marriage, work-life balance, raising godly kids, finding your voice, discovering your calling, writing, communicating. You are just really someone that we all look up to. And so I do have some big questions for you. But one of the funnest stories I'd like to talk about is how you, back in the 90s, were editing John's books.
Yes.
And was it your publisher that said, hey, you might have a gift here?
Yes. So first of all, I want to say every woman dreams of editing her husband. I mean, when your husband gives you a manuscript and you're like, oh, let me tell you how you should say it. I mean, I was living in heaven. I was like, don't use that word. Use this word. And so I'm just living my dream, editing, adding, embellishing, deleting. And I happened to meet, John was like, why don't you come in when I meet with the publisher, since you've been so involved, if they have feedback, I want you to hear it. And so I'm sitting in this meeting and the publisher is like, wait a minute, so you're the one that's been involved in the content editing. Forget grammar. I still don't know how to do grammar, but content I was very involved in. And they said, how about you write a book? And I said, well, wait a minute. It's one thing to, tweak and twist what your husband says. It's a completely different thing to actually come up with my own content. And so, Mindi, what I did is I said, give me 6 months. And if I don't turn in a manuscript in 6 months, it's like there'll be no book. And I put my head down and just wrote what I was going through. And I think a lot of time back then, people weren't vulnerable. People didn't say what they were wrestling with. I mean, I opened up my book and told this story about my husband locking me in the garage, and because I had like storming through the house in anger that I took a hammer to the grill, and people are like, what? But people identify with us based off our vulnerabilities, and then they let us lead them based on our strengths. And so I didn't stay there, but I said, okay, this is where I was, and this is where I am now. This is how I got from a place of anger and fear to a place of hope and a place of strength. And people just resonated. And so I remember I was changing my 4th son's diaper when I got the call. They said, hey, your book is number 14. I said, didn't you guys only produce 16 books? And they said, no, in all the Christian books. And I was like, what? So does it make sense? I wasn't sure. Was it the sleep-deprived rantings of a breastfeeding mother? And they're like, nope, it's actually making sense. And so instead of trying to be profound, let's make sure that when we speak, when we write, when we do anything in life, that we're actually speaking to a need instead of just speaking what we want to say.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and I mean, even in just the titles, I wrote them down because I was like, listen to the titles. Like it literally, it grabs you just from the title. So the first one was Out of Control and Loving It.
Yes, because I had been in control and hating it. Yes, I had to move from in control and loving it, in control to hate and hating it, out of control and hating it, to out of control and loving it. Plus, control is an illusion.
It is an illusion.
Yeah, it is an illusion.
Absolutely. Yeah. The true measure of a woman, you are not what you weigh.
Yeah.
Wow, we could pause that one right there and talk a lot about, female kind of insecurity. Kiss the girls and made them cry. Mm-hmm. Fight like a girl. Lioness Arising. Girls with swords. I mean, you have a theme here where it's like finding who we are and then using that calling. And I can just see the kind of catapult to where we are today, which is that cultural issue that I kind of feel is relevant, but also so important. And it's your new book coming out that I got to get.
Yes, I brought you a secret ARC copy.
An ARC copy. And it is The Fight for Female. So if we could spend a little time today talking about maybe the origin of where this came about. I love that story when you wore a t-shirt that says the future is both male and female. If you could tell us about that, and then just really, what are you seeing as you travel around the world and you speak this message? What are you seeing people have problems with, but also people rallying and saying like, yes, this is important right now today.
Yeah, well, going back to the origin of the t-shirt incident. So I was interviewing somebody and I showed up in this t-shirt that says the future is male and female. It's just, I had spoke at a conference and they gave it out. It was their merch and I loved it. And so I show up and I see these guys all making eye contact with me like, thank you. Thank you for including us in the future. And I had a couple women walk over and say, I need that t-shirt. I need that t-shirt. So I thought, all right, people are resonating. So I get in my car afterwards, I put on sunglasses, put a little lip gloss on, take a selfie, and then I just wrote underneath it, the future is male and female, because without male and female, there is no future. I mean, it wasn't even deep. It wasn't like, it wasn't this like comprehensive biological statement. It was just basic biology. And I posted it, and I remember I drove from the coffee shop back to my house. And before I was even at my home, I was already being attacked. People are saying, what? You're co-signing with patriarchy. Jesus would never agree to the oppression of women. This is bigotry. This is coding like all lives matter. This is racial. That you're a homophobe, transphobe, a demon of hate. I mean, of course there were 922 comments within the first 24 hours. Wow. And it was like people fighting with each other. Now, I will still say the majority of people were like, thank you. But the people that weren't saying thank you were
triggered.
Triggered. And they were fighting with people and people were fighting with them. And it was crazy. And Mindi, anytime I've seen a disproportionate reaction to something, I'm like, there's something more behind this. And I was like, what in the world is going on? So here's what's going on. We have this dynamic of male and female. And we need male and female, not just male, not just female. And we need the voice and the strengths of both. And right after I discovered all of that, my grandson Asher, he'd ridden his bike down, and which I love. I live down the street from 6 of my grandkids, and he just kind of rang the doorbell, and he comes in, and I told him, I said, Asher, tell me your thoughts about the quote, the future is female. And he said, paused a moment, he said, it sounds like I'm unnecessary. And Mindi, it just was like a sword in my heart, that anything that adds value to one group of people should not eliminate another group. I don't want that for my brothers, my husbands, my sons, my coworkers. There's no reason why the future shouldn't be male and female. And I get it that, there's a lot of women that say, toxic masculinity, the men are toxic. It's gotten to the place that you can't even say masculinity without the word association of toxic, because it's been constantly repeated and repeated. And you're a mother of boys. Yes, there's toxic men. But masculinity in and of itself is not toxic. There's toxic women, but femininity in and of itself is not toxic. And I'm just wondering if we don't deal with our own issues and pain and offense and jealousy, because it's a scarcity mindset to say the women are gonna push the men down or aside so that we can rise up. We're better than that. We can gain beauty and strength and wisdom. We can flourish and be all that God called us to be without destroying other people's potential.
Absolutely. And I can think of that applying in so many ways, from a work team to saying like, okay, there's a need for everyone in the team. Like, just because someone's thriving doesn't mean that other people have to be pushed out in order for that person to thrive. I think about the family dynamics, and, just because one kid may be flourishing in a season, it doesn't mean the other kids aren't as valuable and that they have to suffer. As loved. Yeah. And so it is kind of eye-opening to think that the message of promoting females are superior, it is absolutely pushing down the value of the men in our world. And I don't want my boys to feel like they don't have something to contribute. I agree that's sad that Asher feels like that's like, what did he say?
He said unnecessary.
And so
unnecessary in the future.
Both of our genders are necessary in the future to make just to procreate, but then also just the values,
the strengths of both.
I mean, oh my goodness. Yeah. So as you've gone around the world and you've been talking at conferences, and you just got back from Armenia. It's just like you're literally in every country bringing this message. Are you seeing people rise up to say, yes, like we do need both genders. They are both relevant and important, and they can help each other? Or are you finding resistance? What's kind of the take as you go around?
Yes. Well, as I go around, I do think that people are like, oh, thank God, I thought I was the only one that was thinking this way. When we say something out loud that somebody has been wrestling with in their head, we give them permission to stand strong with it. People follow courage, and the truth is you can be courageous on the wrong things. And I feel like there's been a very strong push against male and female. And again, like, people are going to probably push back on you even with what I'm saying and saying, well, there's people that are both. Well, there's still only two. Like, even if you're both, there's still only two. There's not 850. So, and I know that's an exaggerating number, but it just keeps going out of control. And again, so in other countries, they're like, America is exporting stuff that is like defiling the next generation. Now, it used to be our borders were more closed, and I'm not talking about people traveling in. I'm talking about social media, TikTok, things that start in a seed form. It used to be that children went to their parents when they had questions. Now children go to influencers. They go to TikTok
Google.
people. Yes, exactly. And they are creating communities that are subculture where they want to belong. And everybody wants to belong. One of the books you didn't mention was, because there's a ridiculous number, is Without Rival. And that was my book. And that's okay. That is a New York Times. And I realized in 2015 that there was going to be an attack on two things: identity and truth. Identity and truth. See, if you don't know who you are, that's actually more important than even knowing where you're going. Because if you don't know who you are, you'll be lost once you get there. You got to actually have this ability to have this identity. And what's interesting is more and more and more, our culture is identifying itself by what they do or roles. Like, for example, yes, I'm married. I've been married 42 years this October. Yes, wow. I have 4 sons. Yes, I'm expecting my 9th grandchild. All of those are blessings on my life. Those are all things. But your identity cannot be attached to anything that can be taken away from you. So if John died in a plane crash, which hallelujah, it's not going to happen, but let's say if he did, so am I losing my identity because I'm no longer a wife? No, my identity is first and foremost daughter of the Most High God. That is my identity. And anything I do or have is over the top of that. And so we have to go back to a core. So right now we have a generation saying their sexuality is their identity. Their gender is their identity. Their social media influence or even success is identity. But at the end of the day, I remember John and I were very young when somebody said to us, nobody on their deathbed ever says, I wish I would have spent more time at the office. They say, I wish I would have spent more time with my wife, my husband, my children, my friends. I wish I would have enjoyed the moments that I had. And so many people look back with regret. Well, I don't want to land in that same space. So I want to learn by their loss. I want to say, I want a different life. And so having an identity without rival. Like you have multiple kids. You're like me. When I had my first son, I loved Addison so much. I was like, oh my gosh, I love being a mother. I love my son. I wanted to have 6 children. I was like, let's just get this party started. I love being a mother. And when I got pregnant with Austin, I remember while I was pregnant, and of course pregnant women have some, hormones in play. But when I was pregnant, I started to panic. I thought, wait a minute. Am I going to have to take the love I have for Addison and cut it in half and share it equally with stranger baby from the sonogram that looks like an alien? I don't know how I feel about this. And I really wrestled. But when I gave birth to Austin, something new opened up in my heart. And the things I loved about Addison were very different than the things I love about Austin. And the things I love about Alec and Arden are very different than the things I love about. God doesn't love his children equally. He loves them uniquely. And God loves male and female uniquely, not equally. God is love. His love can't even be measured. He's beyond measurement. And I think we forget that.
Wow. Well, and I think it's an important time for us to be talking about this. Okay, changing gears, Lisa, there's something that you've said recently that I think I'd love for you to unpack for our listeners. You've said you will never have authority over the things you choose to be entertained by. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, well, first of all, there's something about laughing and partnering with something that you don't even know that you've actually come into agreement with it. And this sounds a little crazy, but we are in a spiritual warfare. There's stuff happening. And when you have constant messaging coming to you through television shows, through movies, and you kind of laugh at it. You come into agreement with it. You come into the place where I'm like, okay, yeah. And then when you actually want to speak to it, you're already in agreement with it. And, again, going from a Christian frame of reference, you've got to know the truth with a greater intimacy than you've known deception or than you've known a lie. And when you have entertainment, which I don't know what your 2020 looked like, but John and I had never even watched shows that had episodes. Like, we didn't know there were shows. Like, our family, we're Italian, so we'd eat dinner, we'd clean the kitchen together, then we'd play games. We rarely watched anything else unless it was like a family movie night. But during 2020, John and I were like, wait a minute, there are shows that we can watch episodes. Sorry. And so now all of a sudden, John and I, every single night, we're just sitting and we're watching Monk. And I'm like, John, you can be free from OCD. Come on, we're just laughing about things. But we became focused on entertainment, and it dulled some of our awareness. And if we're going to be a people who walk in authority, we cannot walk in agreement with things like pornography, violence. We cannot walk in agreement with things that dishonor men, dishonor women, dishonor children. We cannot walk in agreement with things that are occultic. These are things that we don't want to be like, oh yeah, I agree with that. Like, I'm laughing at it, but because there's something that happens where you get an alliance. I recently did a podcast, Mindi, and it actually really surprised me. I did a podcast, just kind of like no script, nothing, on the Fight for Female podcast, where I thought, I'm going to just talk about spiritual warfare. Okay, 250,000 views. People are aware that they're not wrestling with flesh and blood, that they're not wrestling with somebody that they disagree with or somebody on social media. There is something way more charged in the atmosphere right now. And, we've been warned, like, be careful what measure you give attention to, what you see, what you look at. It's not because God wants to slap you or doesn't want you to have fun, but the way you agree with things, the measure that you give it, it gets measured back to you. And John and I had to say, you know what? We need to be uncomfortable. Listen, there's a lot of things. It's so funny. Crazy true story. I just flew in Friday, and I changed my flight at the very last minute. And there was one seat left on the plane, and they were going to try to charge me. And I was like, no, just do even exchange. And they gave it to me for free. I traveled with Julie and 3 of my grandkids. And this man sits down next to me, and he is covered in tattoos. I mean, he's got skulls, he's got everything on him. And I thought, okay, he was former Mexican mafia. And he was telling me his story. I was delayed, so I sat with him forever. And he said, I never drank and I never did drugs. I said, oh, wait a minute, you were like dealing with all of these things, but you never did it? He said, no. He said, I saw too many bad things happen to people, and I knew that I had to always have an awareness of what was going on. And I would lose that awareness with drugs and with alcohol. And entertainment does kind of factor in that way. My dad, son of refugees from Sicily, I was raised a certain way, and I raised my kids the same way. I'd say play is a privilege for when you're done with work. And I know that a lot of people are like, no, that's wrong. But my boys are responsible, and they know how to play, and they know how to work, and they know the difference in the time.
This episode is sponsored by Something Blue 30A. Looking for the perfect vacation spot to disconnect from everything, put your feet in the softest sand, and enjoy a fresh, renovated 2-bedroom, 2.5-bath townhouse right on the beach in my favorite place in the world? Well, 30A is situated in the Panhandle of Florida, and I'd love for you to check out Something Blue 30A on Instagram and make it the perfect place for your next vacation. I was just thinking that entertainment just it is so easy to sit on our phones and be entertained and scroll. And it is really an interesting concept to think about. Okay, what am I accepting into my mind, my subconscious to be entertained by? Because perhaps I'm low key agreeing with it, even though I might be like, oh, I know that's wrong. It's just kind of, it does dull an awareness that I think.
And it creates a fear of man. Like, I really feel like there's two, in my frame of reference, there's two fears. The fear of man, the opinions of others. I think that's been something people became incredibly aware of and afraid of in the 2020 cancel culture. And I think the scary thing was, I kind of feel like we're in an upside down Alice in Wonderland world where there was the cancel queen who was off with her head all the time. Like, the rules were always changing. We were playing a game where no one knew the rules and everybody was at risk. And so what would happen is people were so afraid of offending that they ended up self-silencing, censoring themselves, but they also started to attack the people other people were attacking. So if I'm watching through social media what everybody else is going through, maybe I'm like, okay, I don't want to have that happen to me. So I'm entertained, I'm watching, and Mindi, in this book, I'm a dual citizen, so I'm an Italian citizen and a U.S. citizen. And a lot of people think that the Christians were martyred in the Colosseum, but that's not true. They were martyred in something called the Circus Maximus. And the Circus Maximus sat 150,000 people. That's where it started. Now, some were martyred in the Colosseum, but the Colosseum was built over the top of Nero's place because they wanted to pretend like he never existed. And it was interesting was you think about where we are right now. I feel like we're right back in a Circus Maximus. We've got social media, which has got the spectators, the gladiators, and the powers that be. And what happened, think about this, 150,000 people. If at any given moment they said, no, this is not right, they could have overwhelmed the Roman government. But all they did was sit there and say, I'm glad it's not me. And we have to be a people that say, nope, that's not enough. I don't want to misquote it, but even with the Holocaust, I think the quote was, the most painful thing wasn't that, the Nazis were taking away the Jews. It was that their neighbors, the people that knew them, the people that had interacted with them, ate meals with them, that the masses never stood up. And I think we're kind of in that place right now. Like, I'm so glad it's not me.
Wow. Thinking about that.
Yeah. It's sobering.
It is sobering to think about. I'm just like imagining the Colosseum as far as like we are the viewers seeing it happen online and the people get attacked instead of using our voice to say, hey, how can we come together to...
And they gave them bread and they gave them wine. And they said, if we entertain them, they'll come. And it's where we are right now. Everybody's got a platform. Everybody has an opinion. But at the end of the day, we're going to give an account for every idle word. And idle doesn't mean even necessarily cruel, but useless, vain words. You and I know that words have the power to build and words have the power to destroy. It doesn't even have to be God's word. It's just words. And so when we curse, we are actually destroying. And when we bless, we're actually building. Now, you mentioned something earlier, kind of the scarcity mindset. A win for you is not a loss for me. A win for you is a win for everyone who loves you. John is very competitive. My boys are very competitive. And there would get some tension in sports and in games just among the guys. And we had to learn as a family to say, a win for him is a win for me. A win for John is a win for Lisa. A win for Lisa is a win for John. Like, we are all in this together.
We're on the same
And
team.
you didn't deduct it out of my bank account of wins when you win. It should just be exciting.
There's an abundance of availability for us all to win.
And that mindset is something new.
Yeah. Okay. The last kind of thing I want to talk about today, even though I could talk for hours with you, is just how you really dial into strategies, but really your perspective on balancing marriage, motherhood, and occupation or calling. Mm-hmm. So I think many of us here listening or, today both parents are working in the home. There's not just the father working, is definitely an era of the moms are working too. And so it's like, we're wanting to really be great spouses, mm-hmm. great friends, great parents, also run our careers well. And you are doing many of those things. I mean, I hate to even ask how many nights you're in your own bed a year, because I think it's probably more that you're not, because you guys travel so often and your kids are raised now, so it is different. Yeah. But I'm just saying, a lot of times you and John will travel together to make sure that that's a priority. I just would love for you to tell us, like, hey, what are your thoughts on those of us that are maybe in the early stages of that journey?
Yeah, well, first of all, when you have certain things that you've made a commitment to outside of your house, you have to edit other portions of your life. I think a lot of times people think you can do everything, but you usually can't do everything at the same time. So, seasonal things. Like when my kids were young, you only as much, had, right? Absolutely. I had 10 years. That was it. From 1 to 10, and then 10 to 20. So life is a time test. And I think too many people forget how fast it goes. Now I'm looking back, and not only do I feel like my children have grown fast, I feel like my grandchildren have grown fast. I'm like, how is that even possible that my oldest grandson is going to be going to high school? I mean, I look at him and he's taller than me. I'm like, how did this happen this summer? So knowing that time is not on our side, that we need to edit our lives, I said, all right, I can't be part-time mom, part-time wife, part-time author, part-time speaker. I'm going to be all of those things at once. So, again, I didn't do a lot of the girlfriend stuff. I had to make a decision that I wasn't going to actually be part of conversations that were going to pull me out of the mindset that I needed to be in to be a good mother or a good wife. I know you and Jordan, and I know you have a fun, beautiful marriage and partnership. And like you guys, John and I work together, which is wonderful and challenging. Wonderful and challenging. At any given moment, it's usually more wonderful than challenging. But when it's challenging, it's really challenging. And so you have to always be understanding that the relationships are more important than the work. And so, I breastfed all my boys until they asked me to stop. They were like, we're not doing this for you anymore. Arden, I think, was 2.5. And then, but I wrote books, from 10 o'clock till 2 a.m. And again, I know not everybody can do things like that, but in my mindset, you can do anything for a few months. That was mine. I'm like, I'm not going to miss the daytime with my kids. So I'm going to do things. I'm going to press into the night. I used to go around and say, I'm going to make friends with the night. That was my saying. I got to write a book. I'm going to make friends with the night. And I'm just going to do that for a very short time, because if I make friends with the night during this time, I'm available with my kids during this time, or my husband. And then relationships are the highest priority for me. My husband and my children are the highest priority. It was funny, I saw something, and I don't know if it's based in science, but it was my reality. They said that husbands cause more stress to wives than kids. And I'm like, yeah, it's a different type of stress. Kids are like a lot of busy, but husbands a lot of times get ignored. And the wives are like, oh, I'm just focusing on my children right now. Mm. And then the kids move out, and the husband and wife look at each other and they're strangers. And that's so tragic. So you've got to make your marriage a priority. For us, as Italians, that meant we did family dinner. And at dinner, we were very organic. We didn't force things. We talked through things. We would do things like, what's your high today? What was your high today? What was your low today? What is the thing you are wrestling with the most? And my husband would say those things too. We didn't just put those fingers on the kids. And the other thing is, our children, they're new, improved versions of us. They're better people. And at the end of the day, that's what you want.
Yeah.
I don't want my kids to make all my mistakes. Mm-hmm. I don't want them to have all my struggles. They're going to have their own. And so we want to position them with strength to go further and farther. But,
how open were you with them with, when you said you guys shared
truth,
your
not details. Truth, but not details. So, somebody really hurt me today. Somebody said such and such, not tell the person. The person isn't important. The idea that the mother can be hurt, that the father can be hurt. And so what I've learned is, first of all, John and I didn't do marriage or parenting perfectly, but we did it well. And doing something well means you go from a place of unhealthy to a place of health. And so we learn from our mistakes. And one of the things that I think all of our boys would tell you, that John and I were always vulnerable, not naked. This generation likes to get naked. You got to be vulnerable, which means, hey, I'm going through something. They don't need to see everything. They just need to understand what's going on in this thing. And then when we made mistakes, Mindy, we owned them. And when you make mistakes and you own them, the mistakes no longer own you. And our boys watched us over and over and over again model that. I was with some people last night and they were like, you and John are both intense. I was like, no, we're not. John's intense. I'm not intense. They're like, you're both intense. Well, I like to think that we're not, because but we are. And we're focused and we're intense, and our kids would be at the dinner table when all of a sudden someone would blow up at the dinner table. And John and I would be like, we'll be right back. If we just step out of the room, and if we fought in front of the kids, they got to be part of us settling it. And we would come back in and say, hey, I just talked to your dad? And they'd be like, yeah. Be like, that was incredibly disrespectful. And then John would say, I just talked to your mom? That was harsh. And they'd be like, yeah, we all knew that, but we're really glad you guys know that. And so we let them know
when you made those.
Yes, relational. And I watch my boys with their wives, and they are so much better than John and I were. But John and I, we don't even fight anymore. And, let's just talk about kids, sports, school, job. It's a lot.
It's a pressure cooker.
Yeah, and then you have to have date night. And you're like, all I want to do is take a bath. Go for a walk. Don't make it hard. Just get out and walk and talk. I remember I would bring up all the problems when we were going to bed. John would be like,
it's like the worst time of day.
Yeah, exactly. He'd be like, we're either going to have sex or we're going to bed, but we are not talking about the problems, because I wanted to offload everything so I could go to sleep. And so then John wanted to offload everything first thing in the morning when I was not yet awake. And we had learned neither of those are good solutions. I haven't had any caffeine. He's trying to offload everything. He's been up since 5 a.m. I'm, struggling towards the espresso machine at 6:30 espresso. And so we had to say, no, we need afternoon. We talk at afternoon. And so many couples don't make their marriage a priority. And then the other thing is, when you're in that rough season, you got to dream.
Oh.
You got to dream. Like John and I, every time we are in a season where we're nowhere at the end of it, you got to dream again, because that's the hope set before you. This is why we're doing the grind right now, because this is what is before us. And we want to make sure we have a goal, because if you don't have intentionality and if you don't have a goal, then you're just going to float. And then you're going to look back and find out you landed somewhere you don't want to be.
What do you guys see for your goal, Lisa and John? Right now, I feel like you're living that dream.
Yeah, in some ways we are. Traveling together to Armenia, that was hilarious and amazing. And I just have so much respect for my husband. Mindy, having a godly husband, having a husband who is committed to me, having a husband who loves me better now, 42 years into my marriage, than he did the first 2 years, which I just, you and I both know, too many people quit. Mm-hmm. There's hard seasons, but hard seasons in a marriage is when you grow stronger. You'll come into a season that's hard. And if you just okay, we're doing this together. Like John and I had to learn, and again, I answer your question. We had to learn that if you're married, you're on one side of the table and the problem's on the other side. Mm-hmm. You cannot see the problem as in between you. The problem is on the other side of the table, and you're both sitting there finding solution. And people are like, oh no, my husband's the problem, or my wife's the problem. No, if you're married, there's a problem. If your wife doesn't feel loved, that's the problem. If your husband doesn't feel respected, that's the problem. And so we need to navigate those. John and I, we live down the street from our grandkids, so this is our dream. We talk about the Word of God in the morning. My husband comes down. I, for years, wanted him to drink shots of espresso, and he wouldn't do it. And so now he does. And we just talk. We talk about, kind of what he's feeling and what he's thinking. And then we move through our day, whether it's writing a book or whether it's recording a podcast or whether it's meeting up with different people. And then we eat dinner together. And John now loves to be my sous chef. And then we walk down the street and we hug all the grandkids. We kiss them, that takes about 45 minutes just to,
pop over.
Yeah, pop over to the two different houses. And then we come back home. And Mindi, I had some things happen with my feet, which is weird, but my husband will work on my feet because he didn't want me to have surgery. And he has worked on my feet now since 2020. Almost every single night, he spreads out my toes and stretches out my tendon. I'm only saying that because this same man didn't even rub my feet when I was pregnant. So that kind
it's
of
just come so far.
Exactly. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
And his goal in life is to love me well. And my goal in life is to love him well. And we believe marriage is two people committed to bring out the best in one another, not besting one another, not winning over each other, not winning arguments, not winning. And so literally, I just enjoy being with him. Just being normal. And then the dreams is every single year, we want to do more for other people that can do nothing for us. And so to that end, we give away, I think we're at 65 million books in 130 languages. And we just want to see people have strong marriages, have, strong families, because at the end of the day, we're going to fight by flourishing. And I think too many people think it's about protesting or even just voting. And yes, I'm all about vote, get out there and vote the way you think you should vote. But if you are not flourishing in your home, because that's where it starts, it's going to change. So we flourish in our home.
Well, and
flourish in our city.
I don't want to say old enough, but far enough along.
No, I am. I'm 64 and John's 65. Yeah.
That you have seen the ups and
fallout.
downs of people, trying to promote a message or try to be successful. But if they weren't stable in their home, then it falls apart. And so I think it's always a reminder for Jordan and I to say, okay, what's number one most important thing to make sure we're good and our kids are good and they feel loved, safe, and secure.
Yep.
And then, from that overflow, we can hopefully share and be a blessing to others. But I want to circle back to your 65 million?
65 million books.
Books have
in
been
130
donated
languages.
in 130 languages as resources for people around the globe.
Yes.
And
so it's everything from downloads to physical resources. And so when we were in Armenia, Armenia is a tiny little nation bordered by Iran, Turkey, Azerbaijan, and Georgia. It is, Georgia's not hostile to it. It has a kind of awkward peace with Iran. But I arrived to speak in this auditorium to the Christians, and the first couple I met said, "Oh, we love you, John and Lisa. We just got out of prison. We were in prison for 4 months in Iran for being Christians." I mean, I don't even understand that, and yet there is something about a people living on the edge of life and death, where instead of being depressed, it enriches their life. It punctuates their life with exclamation marks and what's important. And again, it's that whole editing. And, I talked about editing. First of all, everybody has a right to edit who has a voice in their life. If you're going through social media and maybe you're following somebody and they're not doing anything wrong, but every time you see them, you're jealous, you're angry, you don't, maybe it's nothing about them. Maybe right now you can mute them. You don't have to, your heart is the best source of life. That is where all the issues of life flow out of. So you guard your heart. Not everybody has the right to speak into your marriage, into your children, into your business. You got to know who is in your world. And too many people are more connected with their virtual world than their actual world. And then we get mad at the teenagers for doing that. But what are we modeling for them? And so, again, edit your life. Remember what's important. When I write a book, I turn in so much that the editor says, Lisa, this is peripheral. This is not the major issue. This is a distraction to what you actually want to say. So I'm going to take this out, or this tone isn't right. And if you use this tone, you're not going to be heard. And so we need to be people who say things the way we'd want to hear it and edit our life so that we are understanding input and outcome. And we have permission, and nobody else should be blamed for that. It's always our choice every single day.
Well, I think it's a good reminder to also edit. Like you said, who are the voices? What are we consuming our thoughts with? Whether that's real life friendships or as consumption online. But absolutely, there is a certain almost like special place, a place of honor when you invite someone into your story, whether that's your company story to coach your business, whether that's to give you marriage advice or whatever. I think it's something that as soon as you open that door, that influence is going to have either a positive or a negative impact on you. And so just being really careful on who you crack that door open with.
Yeah. You don't have time for everybody.
No.
Yeah. But I mean, I love your overflow here. I mean, we're sitting here, we're looking at all this beauty. And, this isn't just a business for you. I've watched the girls come through. I've watched girls light up. I've watched women who feel unattractive suddenly feel beautiful, and weddings. I mean, here, let's just talk about this. You and I believe there's both a war and a wedding on the horizon for the church. There's everything that we look at, war, wedding. And you are so intentional with positioning people for weddings and then beautiful moments like proms. And you've been so generous with me about, hey, I just want to see if you want to try on a dress for your banquet night where we do raise the funds so that we can give away.
I know, those nights I have never been to a fundraising event quite like it.
Yeah.
And for
I haven't
people
either.
that don't know, and you've probably been to a fundraising event listening or watching, but I've been to Messenger International's fundraising events, and that's your nonprofit, that's, all of your resources, your books, everything, and the app. And I've been there, and what's so fascinating about it is that before you can even say, hey, we're raising this amount of money to translate into this language, people are fighting over it, like not in an unpolite way, but like in a eager want, raising their.
Do you remember that last year, like Lioness Arising with Farsi? Everybody was like, I want
Arabic.
To do that.
I want to do
was
that.
Like, yes, crazy. They're like, I want to sow into those nations.
In seconds, you had millions of dollars raised, like literally in seconds, because people were so passionate about getting these messages out to our world. And so, I mean, I am honored to be a witness, a friend that can high five and celebrate and cheer you on, because it is so inspiring, the work that you and John are both doing and your team. I know it takes a team. I totally know it takes a team, and
they make us look good.
You guys are going hardcore out in the world and just making disciples around the world. And I'm honored to watch it. And I hope this is another year where you see an overflow, like you say, just an abundance of resources just allocated to the bigger cause. And I'm honored to see that. And I am so thankful we get to talk about marriage, family, friendships, and all of that, because it's not always easy, but we're in an important time. We gotta fight for those things. And I am really excited to
I can't wait for you to read
this advanced reader copy. I am honored to have it, The Fight for Female, and you can already pre-order this online.
It comes out September 3rd.
So if people want to read it or get on the list right now, you can pre-order it on your website, right? Lisa Bevere?
We're sending them to Amazon.
Amazon.
If they go to Amazon, Amazon will ship it as soon as it is in stock.
Okay,
so it's great.
Awesome. Well, I imagine this is going to be another New York Times bestseller for you, and I'm just cheering you on. And Lisa, I hope you'll come back to the Something New show, and people can follow you on Instagram. Would you say
that's where people are the nicest, is on Instagram? Yes.
Okay, so your Instagram handle is just Lisa Bevere.
Yes, and then I have a YouTube channel that's The Fight for Female. I think it's under the Lisa Bevere YouTube channel as well.
Okay, well, I hope people start to engage with your content and really listen to the message you're pushing out there, because it's important for this time, this generation especially. So thank you for your time today. I love you, my friend. So glad you're here. So you guys, if you like this episode, definitely leave us some of your comments, your thoughts. Even if you had some questions, like add it into the comments and we'll definitely circle back to you. Lisa's one of my good personal friends, so I can
pick up the phone.
Yeah, I can pick up the phone and ask her those questions that you might have as follow-up. But please subscribe to this channel and share it with your friends, because we really are about helping you learn how to live a life worth celebrating. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to the show, rate, review, and share with a friend. Also, follow The Something New Show on Instagram and Facebook. If you want a fuller experience, watch the show on YouTube to help you create a life worth celebrating.